10 Famous Empaths, Part 1. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor, and welcome to 10 Famous Empaths. I provided a trailer to this series in order to get people's minds focused on what they regard as a famous individual who might be empathic, i.e., falling within the class of empath. Briefly, I categorize individuals for the purposes of talking about narcissism into the following groups. The narcissists, such as myself, where we have no emotional empathy, and some of our group exhibit false cognitive empathy. Narcissistic people, they are not narcissists, they have strong narcissistic traits, low empathic traits, but they have them, and low emotional empathy. The largest group, the normals, who have emotional empathy for a narrow radius of individuals, for instance their children, parents, siblings, friends, a few colleagues, neighbour, etc., but not very wide. That emotional empathy can be considerably deep, and they have both narcissistic and empathic traits, but not overly strong. And then the final group, the empaths. Individuals who have narcissistic traits, of course, as everybody has those, but they have empathic traits which are stronger. Some empaths have very weak narcissistic traits and strong empathic traits. Some empaths have a close similarity between the two, the narcissistic traits almost being as strong as the empathic traits. In other instances, there can be strong narcissistic traits and extremely strong empathic traits. It varies. But the empath group are those individuals who exhibit considerable empathic traits and considerable emotional empathy. Many famous people are, of course, narcissists or narcissistic, for reasons which are obvious. It provides an environment which is a particular hunting ground for our kind with regard to the pursuit of the prime aims. It also allows us to utilize those arenas in order to assert control, to draw fuel, to gain character traits, and of course residual benefits, such as the creation of a huge fan network, access to opportunities that other people wouldn't have, money, of course. Indeed, the ability to be an entertainer or prominent in politics or at the top of the game sports-wise often lends itself more effectively to the individual that's a narcissist. The ability to be committed to oneself without worrying about anybody else, a lack of remorse, an absence of conscience, not plagued by guilt, complete dedication to the pursuit of excellence. Of course, not all narcissists subscribe to those approaches at all. As you know, there are varying different types of narcissist. But the fame arena is one which is overpopulated by our kind. But that doesn't mean that the gig is all ours. On the contrary, there are numerous famous empaths. I invited you to put forward your suggestions as to individuals that you thought might well be famous empaths. And some of the comments demonstrated that you got them right. Others, hopelessly wrong, which demonstrates the difficulty that people experience with regard to the determination. Nevertheless, thank you very much for your contributions. I enjoyed reading them and found them very interesting, along with the debate that occurred among certain people as to particular names that were referenced. In this series, I am going to tell you about a number of famous empaths. I am going to give, with each one, a relatively brief explanation as to why they are an empath. I am not going to go into the same detail as I would ordinarily do if I placed somebody under the Tudor scope. Time doesn't allow that. But, so that you understand the methodology, I have reviewed the material extensively for each of these individuals and are providing you with a summary to enable you to understand why they fall to be declared as an empath and not anything else. I'd be interested in your observations upon the ones which are mentioned, whether you felt certain ones were surprises, and settle back and listen as you will now find out which of the empaths have been selected. These, of course, aren't just the only ones, there are more besides, and I've looked to obtain a selection across a variety of genres for your interest and education. So, were the ones that you suggested on the list? Let's find out. Number 1. Apparently, there are only 6 degrees between you and him. Yes, Kevin Bacon. Kevin Bacon is an empath. This is exemplified by the fact that he has a long-lasting marriage of over 30 years, which is a faithful one, which is without internal abuse or control. He and his wife are often referred to as one of Hollywood's steadiest couples. He exhibits a fondness for animals and runs a farm. This evidences, in the way that he treats these animals, emotional empathy. It is evident from the interviews that he conducts, both on screen and in print, that he shows a natural empathic response to those that he deals with. Bacon had an upbringing in a tight-knit family which was absent of a lack of control environment. There has been an absence of scandal through the entirety of a long career. He utilised the concept of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon to create a charity which links people and charities. Initially, when talk was made of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, he thought that what was occurring was something of a Mickey take, and then realised that whilst he was somewhat hesitant about its use originally, that it could be harnessed in a way to further some good. He and his wife have proven to be victims of the narcissist Bernie Madoff, losing part of their savings. But when dealing with this, Bacon repeatedly emphasised that the real victims were those who were the less wealthy, the ordinary people, not the wealthy to begin with, and those were the people whose story should be focused upon. He has maintained a clearly stable home life whilst remaining a prominent actor that is famous. Indeed, he has eschewed much of the trappings associated with being an actor and rejecting much of what Hollywood is known for. He is praised by directors for his work ethic and his ease of use, demonstrating both accountability and approachability, an absence of diva-like behaviour. It was regularly the case that at weddings he attended, he would pay the wedding DJ $20 to ensure that the DJ did not play Footloose. He wanted to do this to avoid the bride and groom being upstaged by the song being played and everybody's eyes being on him. That demonstrates emotional empathy and compassion and consideration for others. He is largely ambivalent about the fame that he has achieved. He is regularly and repeatedly praised for his self-awareness, honesty, and openness. These are just a number of examples which embody his various empathic traits. His emotional empathy for not just those immediately around him, but those in a wider sphere, and the absence of strong narcissistic traits, and of course an absence of a need for the exhibition of control and the receipt of fuel. Kevin Bacon is an empath. Number 2. Sanna Marin, the 46th Prime Minister of Finland. Sanna Marin overcame a childhood of financial problems and father's alcoholism. This, of course, is a lack of control environment. However, she was raised by an intervener, her mother and her mother's same-sex partner, and this resulted in her moving towards an empathic outcome as opposed to a narcissistic one, and is relevant also to her school and cadre. Her background is a complete contrast to the usual middle-class background of many politicians. She has been and remained in a stable, romantic relationship with no information provided about interpersonal conflict between her and her partner. She is a mother. She exhibits repeatedly intuitive connection to individuals. There is a consistent embrace of egalitarian ideals. She is a steadfast promoter of inclusivity. She ensured that she took maternity leave from the Finnish Parliament when she was pregnant and had her child. There is an absence of any serious scandal, despite a prominent role in politics. Indeed, the most scandalous, if one can call it that aspect, has been the accusation of an inappropriate picture which was taken when she was naked under a blazer in October 2020. for such an item as that to hit the headlines, compared to numerous political scandals of which you were well versed with regard to politicians elsewhere, demonstrates the sheer absence of scandal in this individual's life. She once worked in a supermarket, demonstrating that she could undertake what might be viewed as lower work, and she cleans her own toilet. There's no grandiosity involved with this individual. She created a government consisting of 5 parties, all led by women, 4 of them being under 35 years old. She is an ardent supporter of gender equality and acts upon her stated principles. There is an absence of grandiosity in her delivery and her ability to deal with people. Interviews demonstrate a repeated emotional empathy towards those whom she speaks to, evidenced by concern, politeness, which is consistent throughout, with no information proffered demonstrating that there is the operation of a facade. She exhibits considerable patience when dealing with individuals, a trait often lacking in many narcissists. Accordingly, the information, a summary of which of you have been provided, demonstrates that Sanna Marin, the 46th Prime Minister of Finland, is an empath. Number 3. Mark Hamill, the American actor. Now, for Hamill, the outlook was decidedly suspect as the offspring of Anakin Skywalker, the petulant brat that became Darth Vader. Hang on. While we're on it, though, although Hamill, of course, as you all know, played Luke Skywalker and was a rebel in the Star Wars films, I was always rooting for the Empire when I watched Star Wars. Ordered, they had the best tech, the best ships, the best uniforms, and they were merely trying to keep law and order. While the real evil, the real problems, though people may not realise this, were the rebels. They refused to conform, they broke the laws, they rose up against the established order. Absolutely outrageous behaviour. They had this ragtag, dirty, mucky spaceships, and they cobbled together this loose alliance that caused problems for the Empire. I was most disappointed when they succeeded, and of course very disappointed in the behaviour of Darth Vader, who for such a long time was a complete badass, and then only went and ruined it all by turning on the Emperor Palpatine and shocking him to death and chucking him down the chute in Return of the Jedi. Most inappropriate behaviour, Vader, and that resulted in your exclusion from Narc Club. Anyway, back to Mark Hamill. Hamill started off with an unglamorous upbringing as one of 7 children, and, as a child, found himself shifting locations repeatedly and regularly as his father was stationed in various places as a US Navy captain. This potentially ought to have been a lack of control environment, but it demonstrates that the genetic predisposition was absent, and, notwithstanding this movement, there were evidently stabilising influences from both of his parents. He found fame at an early age, of course, playing the role of Luke Skywalker, and it was demonstrated that he was uninterested in dating fame groupies. Although he had a short stage of looking at doing so, he quickly lost interest in that at the outset of his career, exhibiting empathic traits with regard to the individuals that he was dealing with, an absence of grandiosity. He has been involved in a long-standing, faithful marriage of over 40 years. When he was married, he undertook a private wedding, despite at the time being one of the most well-known people on the planet, as a consequence of playing Luke Skywalker. He married a non-star. His wife was a dental hygienist, and he opted for that rather than somebody with star power, which is often the case in many Hollywood marriages as a consequence of the pressure to broker a union between 2 individuals who are seen as famous. He is a father and a grandfather, and he stayed up all night with regard to the birth of one of his children, despite being on set, to ensure that he was there at the birth. He repeatedly evidences his self-deprecating behaviour when interacting with other individuals, particularly fans, at conventions and in interviews. He operates with a supportive and constructive social media interaction with his fan base and is very well regarded in that aspect. There is an absence of scandal throughout a long acting and voice acting career. There is an absence of interpersonal conflict. He's well regarded by his various co-stars. Even though he had an early romantic involvement with Carrie Fisher in Star Wars, they remained lifelong friends thereafter. There was no falling out, no disengagement, no smearing that took place. Although he has relatively outspoken political views, these are commensurate with an individual who is an empath. Empaths can have and hold strong views, and that doesn't mean that somebody is necessarily a narcissist just because they exhibit certain views. Hamill utilises his platform to speak his mind with regard to a variety of issues, but does so evidencing his emotional empathy nevertheless. Accordingly, Hamill demonstrates a range of empathic traits with regard to his honesty, his compassion, his caring nature, exhibiting a strong sense of justice also, and this affords with his considerable emotional empathy for other people, particularly those around him, in terms of family and friends. Accordingly, these are the first three individuals from our list of famous empaths, and they readily make the grade: Kevin Bacon, the American actor, Sanna Marin, the 46th Prime Minister of Finland, and Mark Hamill of American acting fame, and of course, Luke Skywalker. That concludes part 1. Join me in part 2 for further famous empaths. Who is coming up next?